to build her January 6th, 1941 in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. She wasn't completed until January 29th, 1944. So first of all, she wasn't here during the attack on Pearl Harbor. She's the last biggest U.S. battleship ever built, part of the Iowa class. She has 3 sister ships, the USS Iowa, the USS New Jersey, and the USS Wisconsin. She was christened by Mary Margaret Truman. That name may ring a bell to some of you. History buffs. Her dad was a junior senator from the great state of Missouri. We have anyone from the state of Missouri? Her dad was Harry S. Truman, and later became our U.S. president. After she was christened, I affectionately called her Herb, and I'll be calling her Mo in a minute. She goes through sea trials. June 11th, 1944, she's fully commissioned, ready for service. World War II, we were in 2 theaters of operation. We were in Europe, and we were in the Pacific. And Mo gets assigned to the Pacific Theater, where she serves honorably as part of 3 major engagements: the Battle of Iwo Jima, the Battle of Okinawa, which is one of the fiercest in the Pacific, and also mainland Japan. September 2nd, 1945, a significant date in our history. The formal surrender by the Japanese, Tokyo Bay formally ending all of World War II, happened on this ship, which will be the second portion of the presentation of the covered area about midship down there. Unfortunately, we're only in peace for a few years. War breaks out in Korea in 1950. And Mo does 2 tours in Korea. February 2nd, 1955, she's decommissioned for the very first time. And he didn't think these old World War II battleships were going to be effective weapons, or they kind of outuse their usefulness. He sent her to Bremerton, Washington, where she stayed in mothballs for 29 years. Under President Reagan's administration, President Reagan took office in 1981, wanted to pump more money into defense. He wanted to build a fleet up to about 600 ships. Takes a lot of money through appropriations. Building one of these battleships in 1981, $82, $5 or $6 billion. Way too much money. But they took a look at this Iowa class and they said, hey, those 4 ships, those old World War II 16-inch guns, can still be effective. We can add a few other pieces of armament to make her a very effective weapon, which is what they started to do for about $475 million in 1984. She was recommissioned May 10th, 1986. So what changed on it? Remember, there's always got to be a return on our investment. Prior to the modernization, we had about 2,800 men on the crew. We got rid of 1,000 right off the bat. What did those 1,000 men do? We got a 50 cal machine gun right here. We got one at midship. You can imagine about 130 of 50 cals, 20 and 40 millimeter weapons, basically used for anti-aircraft. It takes 2 or 3 men to operate each one of those weapons. 2 or 3, sometimes 4. Most of those were gone. First weapon system they put in there, look on the superstructure. On the port side, which would be the right side looking at me, and I'll duck, about halfway down on the port side, you see a little white dome thing, looks like R2-D2 up there, about halfway down from the top. Some of you are shaking your head. See it on the right side? Okay, lady in the back shaking her head, I guess she knows. Right, okay, that's a Gatling gun. There's a barrel sticking out the bottom. They call that the Sea-Whiz, fully automated. It fires 3,000 rounds a minute. They added 2 of those. They also added some real nice enhancements, missile systems. Tomahawk cruise missile, max range about 1,500 miles, basically used for ship-to-shore engagements. Then they added harpoon missile, max range about 900 miles, used for ship-to-ship engagements. They also replaced a lot of the teak. By the way, this is where a lot of your money's going. Even though we're non-profit, we're putting the money right back in the ship. You saw the older stuff already, you walked on it. But they also installed air conditioning below deck. So in spite of all those weapon systems, which the crew probably didn't really care about, they certainly loved having air conditioning below deck. Got pretty hot down there. So they installed air conditioning. She's recommissioned, she's ready to go. You guessed it, a couple years later, we're in another war. Receive-alike war, Persian Gulf War. And Mo is the first battleship ever to fire a Tomahawk cruise missile from her deck. We have video of that in the wardroom. I'll lead you, kind of guide you that way after I'm through with my presentation. She fired the first Tomahawk cruise missile January 17, 1991. And she subsequently fired 27 additional ones at targets on Iraq. And also, you know, from those old World War II 16-inch guns, all 9 barrels, she fired about 760 rounds at targets on Kuwait, as well as an island off of Kuwait. Still pretty effective. Later that year in 1991, she sails all the way over here to Pearl Harbor, a little R&R before they decommissioned her for the last time. It had already been 50 years since the attack on Pearl Harbor. She was here as part of Operation Remembrance, honoring what happened at the attack on Pearl Harbor. And then just a few months later, March 31st, 1992, she's going back to mothballs. They're not bringing her out this time. She's staying in mothballs. And one of just a few things are going to happen. The first two would have been tragic, considering the historical significance of this ship. They could have put her out to sea, used her for target practice and sank her, or they could have sold her for scrap. That would have been a real tragedy. They could have sold her to some foreign country. However, a lot of states and municipalities were bidding on these Iowa-class ships to use as tourist attraction. That's where her three sister ships went. However, Missouri was awarded to the U.S. Missouri Memorial Association, a non-profit organization. They got her. And I mean, they got her. The Navy said, here she is. They couldn't even crank the engines up. They had to do a little work on her just to get her ready for sea, and they towed her down to Long Beach. They had to get her up a little bit, put just a few panels on her. They still didn't crank the engines, and they towed her all the way out here, where she currently sat in this position in dry docking. They took her out of the water. They had to do a lot of major work on the hull. In 50 years to the day she was christened, they dropped the pylon. She is sitting in the water. We are floating in the water. Of course, you can't tell we're floating. We're floating in the water. She is open for tours 50 years from the date she was christened. And I think we could probably all agree, I personally cannot think of a more appropriate location. She's bookends with the Arizona off her bow. The Arizona representing when we entered World War II, and the Missouri, where the official surrender happened right here on her deck. And even if we look at the barrels and the 16-inch guns of the 6 barrels looking at you, they're still in that salute position, honoring the over 1,100 men that went down on the Arizona that are still interred in. Any questions about the legacy? You know, you really can't take into perspective the size of the ship until you're on her. At least that's what I found out becoming a tour guide. She's about 3 football fields long, 887 feet, 3 inches to be exact. And at her height, all the way down from the keel or the bottom of the boat, all the way to the top of that communication tower, 20 stories, 209 feet, 3 inches. And if you look on the starboard side, which would be the left side, as you're looking at the ship, try to get some perspective where the widest point might be. The Navy calls that the beam. But the widest point is only 108 feet, 2 inches. And the reason she's only 108 feet, 2 inches is in those days, the quickest way to go from ocean to ocean is to navigate through the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal is only at 110 feet. So it did allow less than a foot on either side. I had the distinct honor and privilege of meeting 6 veterans that served on her during World War II the entire time. I was humbled just to be in their presence. And I did happen to get to ask one question I was really curious about. And I asked the 96-year-old, the oldest veteran, what it sounded like when they went through the canal, because you're going through those locks and you're iron and steel against iron and steel. What's that screeching sound? And the only thing that came to mind, he was standing next to his wife. They were married 60-some years, God bless him. He said that, well, you know, Sonny, when you were in school and they used chalkboards, I'm thinking the young kids still have chalkboards nowadays. But when I was in school, they had chalkboard. They made that screeching sound. He said, if you multiply that by 100,000 times, it probably wouldn't even be close. I guess it was pretty deafening going through the canal. But I appreciated him telling me that story, as well as a couple of them told me some other stories I'll share with later. Fully loaded, 58,000 tons. Max speed, 40 miles an hour or 33 knots. But the biggest characteristics of the Iowa class are the guns. There's a total of 9 big barrels. There's 6 barrels looking at you, there's 3 aft. All barrels are 16 inch, fires a 50 caliber round. Each barrel is 67 feet long and weighs 239,000 pounds. About the equivalent of a space shuttle. 2 barrels about the equivalent of a 757. What you see here, there's 3 barrels containing what they call a turret. Each barrel can move independently up and down from 5 to 45 degrees in about 5 seconds. The entire turret can swivel. Starboard to port, port's this way. Starboard, port, or broadside, about 180 degrees in about 40 seconds. What you see here goes 5 decks below. The lowest level contains a powder magazine where all the projectiles are stored, a series of hoists to bring all of them up. It takes 96 men to operate one turret. Minimum of 77. They typically had about 96 men. Just to give you some perspective, over here in the yard we have some Navy destroyers. 300 men on one destroyer. First, those are the new class destroyer. This is an old World War II battleship. When she was in full operation, you needed 300 men, almost 300 men just to operate the turret. She fires 2 types of projectiles. One's an armor-piercing round, the other is a high-capacity explosive. Both are on display as you got your picture taken. Hopefully you saw it on camera. The pointy type projectile is the armor-piercing round. Weighs about the equivalent of a Volkswagen, about 2,800 pounds. will penetrate about 30 feet of concrete before it detonates. The other, that comes a high capacity, weighs 1,900 pounds, will take out the area about the size of a tennis court, 20 feet deep. Obviously, the firepower in those days, they didn't just fire one round and then sail off. They had to fire multiple rounds. A cruise missile, for example, you can fire one cruise missile 1,500 miles away. They can put it right in your pocket. These babies, they're going to fire one or two, see how close they are, then they'll make the adjustment. The interesting thing is the rangefinder, all the guidance control system were built in the 1920s. My salute to and that would be my great-grandparents. I still salute the greatest generation, my parents, of World War II generation. Either type projectile takes the equivalent amount of gunpowder, 660 pounds. Now what you were sitting on, some of you that were sitting waiting for me to start the tour, those were the containers that housed all the gunpowder. Right down here in front of us, you see a armor-piercing projectile right there, right in front of it, are two of the powder kegs. The colonels looked like big marshmallows. They weighed 110 pounds apiece. It took 6 of them to fire any type projectile. The Navy guys had to load those manually. She fires at a range about 30 miles max. They typically fire at about 23 miles. It takes 91 seconds to hit the target. 23 miles is beyond the horizon. So at a rate of 2 rounds per minute, theoretically you could have 27 projectiles or salvos in the air. Before the first one hit, you got 26 right behind it. So if you had the right coordinates right off the bat, you had one of our Army boys or Marines, and maybe there's some of you in this group, thank you for your service, by the way, all veterans. You had someone on the ground, they would help sight in, they'd give you some coordinates. And then what's interesting, the ship slows down because she's going forward anyway. The barrels are broadside, she never fires in a forward position. Those barrels will still be slightly moving to those coordinates. Then they fire them off. Now what happens when she fires? Other than there's a large fire plume and a large boom, if you're out here on the deck, it'll blow you right off the deck. And the only thing that happens inside the turret itself, you have a recoil about 5 feet. So the ship doesn't move sideways. Even if she was on a solid piece of ice and you fired all 9 barrels at one time, which you can do, you'd be lucky if it didn't move 2 inches if it was on a solid piece of ice. I mean, what our ancestors built, pretty awesome. I mean, pretty incredible, the technology, you know, considering, of course, we would consider it outdated nowadays. I gave you a lot of information. There won't be a quiz later. If you don't have any questions, we're going to make our way to the surrender deck. If you give me the courtesy, let me do the presentation first, and then I'll go ahead and explain everything that's up there and give you a chance to look around. Okay, let's head forward. Thank you. During the last portion of the presentation, so we know that President Truman takes office, Roosevelt passes away. 2 days later, could have been 3 days, we're not clear on those, he goes to a secret private meeting. He finds out about the Manhattan Project. Didn't even know about it as vice president. The bomb, the atomic bomb. And it was decided that we would drop the first atomic bomb in our history, which is truly devastating, and what a tragic event on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. 3 days later, August 9th, we drop a second one. And you know there were talks that we're going to drop additional bombs. War is, if you think, if there's winners, there are no winners in war. There are innocent people that die. That's a fact. We had talked, we're going to drop additional bombs. We didn't hear from the Emperor until the 15th of August, 7 days later. The Emperor reaches out, contacts us, the Allies, said, hey, we're ready to unconditionally surrender on your terms. So we got their verbal, we needed something in writing. This ship ends up being the designated ship where the ceremony, the surrender document is going to be signed. Probably because President Truman was from the state of Missouri and he picked this ship. And this ship isn't here, we're in Tokyo Bay. Sunday, September 2nd, 1945 was an overcast day. We didn't have this nice shaded part here. So we had about 3,500 men scattered throughout, anywhere you can think of on the ship. We're all looking down in this area. Right behind, we had platforms set up for the media. The Master of Ceremonies, Supreme Allied Commander, 5-star General Douglas MacArthur. We want to start about 9 o'clock. Well, I didn't mention the Japanese, they did have one condition that we honored. There was one condition. And the majority of Allies honored it. Several of them, the Allies didn't honor it, didn't want to do that. But we did honor it. The Emperor asked not to be here to sign the document, even though we were in Tokyo Bay, because he felt that he might have lost face with his people. We honored that request. So there was a representative that stood in the Emperor's place. Everything was supposed to start about 9 o'clock. We were a few minutes late, mainly because the representative that replaced the Emperor had a bad leg. Mr. Shigemitsu, you'll see a picture of him right over there in a minute. He's the guy with right in the front with the tuxedo and the top hat and the wooden cane. It took him a few more minutes to come up those stairs right where you came, and all delegates, and all 9 of them were standing right where these people are standing, looking in that direction. Of course, MacArthur wasn't going to be out there waiting on the Japanese. He was going to wait until the Japanese were firmly in place. So like I said, I set the stage. They're standing there looking in that direction. 3,500 men and a few women and media, like the Japanese are literally surrounded. People just staring at them. Remember, they never surrendered in their entire history. But once they're firmly in place, and not before, down that ladder over there, that guy's coming, is the Supreme Allied Commander, General Douglas MacArthur. Behind him is Admiral Nimitz. Behind him is Admiral Halsey. MacArthur is master of ceremonies. Most of his crew, all of his crew was military. His job was to get it signed and to move forward. Wasn't going to be a lot of fanfare, not a lot of drawn-out speeches. We're here to get a document signed and press forward. He had the ship's chaplain, Chaplain Falk, render a brief prayer. Now, trying to keep the Japanese at ease probably wasn't an easy task. I would like to mention that flag flying right there, hanging there. The original flag, that represents the original flag. The original one was when Admiral Perry opened up trade with the Japanese in 1850, a sign of peace. MacArthur had that original flag flown out here for the ceremony. Again, just to try to keep the Japanese as comfortable as they could, because they didn't know what to expect. So after the chaplain renders his prayer, if you, man, I get you step forward, there's a group right behind you. You get right in front of you, I don't like it. Before MacArthur gets up there, I already talked about the tragedy of war being such a, with the loss of life. Conservative estimates, 69 million people in World War II died. 69 million. 98% of the world was engaged in that war. 98% of the world. What does that mean? That means every one of us standing and sitting right here, right now, were impacted in some way, shape, or form by our ancestors. Every one of us. They felt it. Oh, I did mention the 69 million, 50 million were men, women, and children. Truly devastating. You got a guy like MacArthur who's been through the Mexican-American War at the turn of the century, World War I, World War II, and eventually Korea. If someone saw the devastation and total impact of war as far as being such a human tragedy, he probably was him. MacArthur gets up to the microphone and basically says, we're here to talk about peace, tolerance, and rebuilding. It's time to move forward. We're here to sign the documents. The table is now gone. Right here is the plaque indicating where the table was. The original table was a beautiful mahogany table the British made. However, the surrender documents are about this wide. The British table was about this wide. It didn't look right. Last minute to run downstairs, the guys were eating chow down there. They got them off the table, brought up a regular Navy chow table in the middle, put it right up here, put a nice little tablecloth on it. It was perfect. So they got the table, the Japanese are here. MacArthur sits down, 2 of the delegates come forward. And you'll see him on the 3 pictures over there. There's a picture to your right under the flag. You'll see the delegates. Mr. Shigematsu is the Emperor's Foreign Minister. He signs on behalf of the Emperor. He steps back. The gentleman to his left, to your right, as you're looking at the picture, the guy in the green uniform, is the General of the Army, General Umezu. He signs on behalf of the Army. He is not signing, he joins his group. MacArthur uses 6 pens to sign the document. I guess he might have wanted momentum. I know one of the pens ended up being in Annapolis, Maryland. Excuse me, at West Point. MacArthur went to West Point, not the Naval Academy. But 2 of the pens, the first 2 pens, I always like to bring up. I think he did the most honorable thing, being a veteran myself. MacArthur, one of the senior officers that were in charge of all the prisoner of war camps, Japanese prisoner of war camps, to be there for the ceremony. They just got in the day before. They were both standing right behind him. As MacArthur partially signed his name using the first 2 pens, he turned and he handed a pen to each one of those men of their sacrifice and commitment to the entire effort, representing all the POWs. One was Lieutenant General Wainwright from the United States. The other was Lieutenant General Percival from Great Britain. Lieutenant General Wainwright's nickname was Skinny. The reason they were skinny, when he went in, he weighed about 200 pounds and was my height. When he was standing behind MacArthur, he was still my height, but he only weighed 95 pounds. And Lieutenant General Percival didn't weigh a whole lot more. So you could see the impact of their internment just by looking at them. What an honorable thing MacArthur did. So MacArthur finishes signing the documents. Then he asked the Allied nations to step forward. The first one is Admiral Nimitz signed on behalf of the United States. And then China, Great Britain, Russia, Australia, Canada, France, the Netherlands, and New Zealand. Behind us here, in the glass case, is a copy of the surrender document. Right below it, from left to right, are pictures and times of who signed it from left to right. You'll be able to look at that in a minute. Everyone gets through signing. MacArthur goes back up to the microphone. We have a picture over there, picture on the left, underneath the flag. MacArthur basically said all the documents have been signed. These proceedings now are officially closed. 23 minutes. It was over. 23 minutes. Then the bloodiest war as far as being such a human tragedy in our history. It was over. Everyone went back to their duties. The Japanese delegates left. MacArthur goes back up that ladder, goes to the radio room and says a brief radio address to the world. Today the guns are silent. The great tragedy has ended. The great victory has been won. The skies no longer ring death. The seas bear only commerce. Men everywhere walk uprightly in the sunlight. I thank a merciful God, for He has given us the faith, the courage, and the power from which to mold victory. We must go forward and preserve in peace what we won in war. It's an awesome speech, and that's only a few sentences, but they're my favorite sentences. It still gives me goosebumps even recite it. So I pretty much covered everything on this presentation. We got one more to go. But while you're here, before you go rushing off, I'll be on the other side of this group waiting for you. You can take a look at the memorabilia here. There's 3 pictures under the flag. There's a nice plaque there above that door. You can read that, take a picture of that, and you can look in that doorway. That's the captain's inboard cabin. You can step in there and see what life is like for the captain. And then here's a copy of the surrender document here. So I'll give you just a minute, and I'll catch you on the other side of this group. Okay? We're going to back up from the surrender to the Battle of Okinawa. You know, I think it's noteworthy to talk about the Japanese in this case. You know, they are a proud people, proud tradition, and never surrendered their entire history, and they really felt they could win the war. They really tried to prolong it as long as they could. Unfortunately, the #1 resource they were running out of was men, pilots specifically. So they started instituting the kamikaze pilot. And basically what they were going to do is they were looking for young men. The youngest age reportedly was 19 to become a kamikaze pilot. There wasn't a lot of qualifications. They could start a car. They could pretty much fly a plane. And they pretty much got a very short, and I mean very brief, course in aviation. Starting the plane, be able to take off, and there are hundreds, you got to imagine, hundreds of kamikaze planes. They've got a 500-pound bomb, just one, strapped to the bottom of the plane. You got no parachute, no radio, and you're being led by the Japanese Zero fighter pilots. So kamikaze stands for divine wind, so you can imagine, just like the wind, you got hundreds of these planes, and they're looking for major Allied battle groups, and once the fighter pilots identify them, they just kind of point, and they fly right into an enemy battleship, hopefully damage or destroy it. During the Battle of Okinawa, which is one of the fiercest in the Pacific, the U.S. Navy, we lost 34 ships went down. And all the engagements in World War II in the Pacific, the Japanese lost 4,000 men as kamikaze pilots. Admiral Halsey was quoted by saying that was the only thing, nothing he feared more than the kamikazes. So here we are in the Battle of Okinawa. I think it was raging, 50 days? We're in April, 45. We got the barrels facing, which way is this way? Port or starboard? Must be a Navy guy. Starboard, that's right. We got the 16 inches, all 3 turrets. We got the 5 inches. We're firing on shore emplacements as our Marines and Army folks, mainly Marines, are trying to take that island back. And we got the sky filled with planes like fireflies. I mean, they're everywhere, hundreds of them. And remember, the deck is strewn with a bunch of small anti-aircraft guns, 20, 40 millimeter, and 50 cals. A Baker just happened to be coming out close to where you just came down those stairs, taking a quick smoke break. Fortunately, he had a camera, and the camera's looking in this direction. And right down here, coming right at us, heavily damaged, is a kamikaze plane with a 500-pound bomb strapped to it. The Baker got the picture. I know you're going to want to take a look at it in a minute. It's the first picture over here. You'll see the plane in the middle right, left-hand portion, little blimp of the plane just before it hits. Not only notice that plane, notice what our men are doing, manning their positions. They're still there manning their positions, even though they're just feet away from possibly in harm's way. It's an outstanding picture of what kind of dedication and loyalty our greatest generation really had. But we got the picture, the plane hits, it breaks up into several pieces. The 500-pound bomb, the part of the fuselage, the left wing fall harmlessly in the ocean, doesn't detonate. The right wing landed about where the Baker just was. He fortunately went inside. The fuselage ended up right here. There's a huge fire plume. We got a picture of it. It's the last picture down here. So in other ships, Missouri's heavily damaged, people are hurt or injured. Unbelievably, nobody even got a scratch. The fire plume looks worse than it was. It's out in 3 minutes. We're still in this major engagement. They put the fire out. They start to sweep the wreckage overboard. They discover there's a body contained in the wreckage. And I would suspect, considering that guy just tried to kill us, why don't we just sweep that overboard, his body along with the remains? But the captain, who happened to be on the bridge at the time, Captain Callahan, said, no, we're going to give that young man a proper burial. He didn't get a lot. If he would have voted, I don't think there's been a crew member on the ship that would have voted in the captain's favor. You know, but he was the captain. But think about it for yourself. Just put yourself in his position in that generation. And I know that birth records were not kept too well. The youngest man reportedly to serve on the ship was 14. The average age was 16 to 19, and I suspect some of them probably lied about their birth certificates. And I mean that in all sincerity, because my father was a World War II veteran. He has 3 different birthdays, 3 different birth years. But the youngest man to serve in the U.S. Navy during World War II was 12. That's a fact. He enlisted at 11. Calvin Graham. He's from Texas. He actually won the Bronze Star. Thank God that President Carter and Reagan, right when Reagan went in, after they kicked him out, the guy won the Bronze Star at 12 years old. They gave him all his medals and service ribbons back in the 80s. But can you imagine your 12-year-old son? I mean, I can't even fathom that in my own head. But they were the greatest generation. Now back to the captain. He made the right decision. There was young men on this ship sacrificing their life, no different than that young Japanese airman. I think he made the right decision. April 11, 1945, they put the body below deck. They didn't have a Japanese flag handy. They had to fabricate one. Then on April 12, 1945, right over here in Battleship, right when these people were stepping over, they gave him full military honors and buried him at sea. We have a picture of it, the middle picture, right over here. Also on that picture, lower right-hand portion is a picture of the captain. The upper right-hand portion that was donated by his family. Again, I have to commend the U.S. Missouri Memorial Association. They finally figured out who he was in the late 1990s. Rather, I think 2000. Petty Officer Second Class Aishinto was his name. He was 19 years old. Yep, he probably would have had a life. He definitely had a family. His family donated pictures of him. They actually met with the captain's family in 2001 and thanked the captain's family for what their dad did for their son. What an awesome story. April 12, 45, of course, we were still in Europe. We're within a month of ending that war. And what made the headlines April 12, 45? That's when President Roosevelt died. That's what took all the pages. Not on some spot in the map, 7,000 to 8,000 miles away from Washington, D.C. And certainly not the fact that we gave the enemy an honorable burial at sea. But truly, war is tragic on all sides. That pretty much ends my part of the presentation. Thank you very much for listening to me, giving me your undivided attention. It's an honor to be able to talk about the ship. I feel like I'm honoring all those veterans, and I thank all those veterans, or past veterans that are in this group, but especially the World War II generation. They, in my opinion, they were the greatest generation. So now comes the fun stuff. Before you go anywhere, if you have to use a restroom, the only one we have, the women's is here, the men's on the other side. While you're waiting for your loved one or kids to go in the restroom, you can go up this turret right here. It's open in the back. You can step up here and take a quick look at what's inside here. It's plexiglass off, but you can look in there and see enough to get some perspective what life was like in there. It couldn't have been comfortable. You're welcome to take a look at these 3 pictures, especially the first one. It tells you a heck of a story. But while you're here, go below. Right underneath the last barrels, right underneath it, there's a big gray duct. It's like a ventilation duct. There's a door that faces forward. It'll take you down. We have a brand new kamikaze exhibit donated by the Japanese. We have letters that are translated in English. They're gut-wrenching. Just read a couple of them. The Japanese made them write their loved ones, their family, before they sacrificed their life for their nation. And we have it. There's a lot of interesting reading, lots of pictures, a lot of memorabilia down there. Plus, you can see what life was like for the senior enlisted folks, the petty officers, master chiefs, okay? You stay down there, follow the arrows, 6 minutes, less than 6 minutes, probably 4 minutes. You can walk forward below deck, you'll be right below the surrender deck where we just were. That's the wardroom. That's where the senior officers quartered. That's their mess. It's not really a mess. That's where they chow, but they call it a mess. That's a Navy term. But you're in that room. We have 2 video monitors from the commissioning, decommissioning, firing from the Gulf War. You can take it all in from that room. Also, you're looking forward. This is the port side. Remember our Navy guy over here. This is starboard. Port side's left. Go out the door. Make a left. 25 paces. There's another set of stairs that'll take you up to the bridge. Go up there, you get the photo op, you go right by the Sea Whiz, you go right by the cruise missiles on display, and you get up to the bridge, take that great photo op of the Arizona plus the rest of the bay. Any questions? It's been an honor and a privilege again. Thank you very much. Enjoy your vacation. Enjoy the ship as much as I did talking about it. Thank you.
Thank you.